Good evening, I'm Fana Sheh. Our top story for tonight, PM Anwar holds bilateral talks with Russia's Putin, and GCC leaders increase pressure on Trump. That's coming up on Hawani International. Our top story for tonight, Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin, with both sides calling for increasing ties and economic cooperation. The meeting is the main agenda of Anwar's 4-day official visit to Russia until May 16th. Now, Anwar said Russia-Malaysia relations extends beyond diplomatic engagements, expressing hope for more important discussions in the coming days. Putin, on the other hand, said Malaysia is a reliable and significant partner, stressing that economic ties remain stable and good, and that it would assist Malaysia's engagement with BRICS as partners. Now, the two leaders discussed political, trade and economic issues, focusing on strengthening cooperation between Kuala Lumpur and Moscow. In the press conference, Anwar also extended an invitation for Putin to come and visit Malaysia. Now, earlier, Anwar attended a roundtable meeting with Russia's industry leaders, focusing on exploring new collaborations in various fields, including food manufacturing, agriculture and technology. Anwar also met Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and received a visit from the Grand Mufti of the Russian Federation, Sheikh Ravel Ganuddin. Now, he will attend the Kazan International Economic Forum on May 15th and 16th to deliver the keynote speech. Russia and Malaysia maintain strong diplomatic ties, with Anwar and Putin last meeting in September 2024 on the sidelines of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok. The conflict in Gaza garnered more attention on the second day of Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East. This comes after increased pressure from the leaders of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, in their summit with the US President today. Now, Luqman Haris from Riyadh has more.
Yes, Farhana, the first day of Trump's official visit to Saudi Arabia seemed to be dominated by agreements on investments and economic cooperation, to the point that it perhaps raised concerns, especially amongst the Muslim world, on other geopolitical issues, especially Gaza. Trump did briefly mention Gaza yesterday while he was speaking at the Saudi-US Investment Forum, saying that the people of Gaza deserve better. There are no other humans on earth that has gone through worse treatment, but it ended just like that. But today we are seeing a renewed push and interest from leaders of the GCC for the US to take a more active stand on fighting for lasting peace in the besieged region. And Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, made a direct and public plea to Trump for the US to take more of a leadership role in that conflict.
ونسعى معكم فخامة الرئيس وبالتعاون مع أشقائنا في دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي لوقف التصعيد في المنطقة وإنهاء الحرب في غزة وإيجاد حل دائم وشامل للقضية الفلسطينية وفقا لمبادرة السلام العربية والقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة.
And so interestingly, it seems that the second day of Trump's visit to the Middle East, which will also see him visit the UAE and Qatar, have taken a slightly different gear. It's no longer, at least for now it seems, it's no longer about investment agreements and pledges as to who can invest more into which country, but rather it has taken a turn into to focus more on geopolitical issues. Trump, of course, made waves when he announced yesterday that the US would lift sanctions on Syria. In fact, earlier today, Trump did meet with the new leader of Syria, Ahmad al-Sharab, here in Saudi to discuss that matter further. And he also said, of course, that the US is open to signing a new agreement with Iran. Didn't give any sort of details whether that would be similar to the nuclear agreement signed previously by President Barack Obama. But it's interesting to see the shift in focus to the second day. Trump now has left Saudi Arabia. He's headed to Qatar and UAE to continue his 4-day visit to the Middle East before returning to the US. And it remains to be seen whether we will see a similar theme as to whether economic and trade investment arrangements will take priority, or whether there will be a different tone there in those two countries. But of course, we will bring everything to you from here in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms, astroawani.com, and of course here on Channel 501. For now, Back to you, Farhana, in Bukit Jalil.
Right, we unpack more on Trump's visit after this break.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro Awani menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
The United States should be mindful about the decision to lift all sanctions on Syria, as announced by its President Donald Trump. Director of the Middle East Program at Defense Priorities, Rosemary Klanek, says the U.S. should exercise caution about backing the new leadership.
The decision comes as Trump meets with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, marking a high-profile engagement between the two nations.
So Syria has been under sanctions for decades of various sorts. But the most recent round of sanctions that the United States put on happened during the Arab Spring uprisings after Bashar al-Assad began brutalizing his own people in response to their uprising against his regime. And since those sanctions were put on, the United States has this habit of putting sanctions on and never quite taking them off. The president should also be cautious, like the United States should be cautious too, because you don't want to go whole hog in and invest in any particular regime, because even though they've stayed for 6 months, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue beyond 6 months, right? What we saw in Syria is truly a revolution, right? A new regime came to power that wants to reorder society in a fundamental way. It's not going to be a dynasty the way that it was under the Assads. And anytime that happens, there's so much sort of at stake and so much up in the air that things can change in really unpredictable ways.
Trump said on Tuesday he would order the lifting of sanctions on Syria at the behest of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, a major U.S. policy shift ahead of an expected meeting with Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara.
How critical is a unified ASEAN approach in our tariff negotiations with the U.S.? And how can Malaysia engage our neighbours in facing this mammoth challenge? Earlier today, Taylor's University launches its Distinguished Diplomat series with a dialogue on Malaysia-Singapore relations. For a snapshot of the conversation there, our correspondent Lauren Tan speaks to former Malaysian Ambassador Datuk Dr. Elango Karupanyan.
Today we're here at Taylor's Lakeside campus for Taylor's Distinguished Diplomat series. Joining here with us is Datuk Dr. Elango Karupanyan. Dr. Elango is a former Malaysian ambassador and currently an adjunct professor in Taylor's University. Dr. Elango, how vital is a unified ASEAN country approach to resolving the issues of tariffs to each of the member countries?
Thank you very much. I think you chose a very important word, unified approach. Well, insofar as the tariffs are concerned, you all know that the tariffs are of different levels, right? So obviously you cannot have a common approach. But unified approach means that the 10 countries can agree to deal with the US on explaining the positions of how the tariffs hurt bilateral relations between America and Southeast Asia. So a unified approach would allow us to explain to the Americans that ASEAN is important to them. So therefore, our collective voice in would conveying the concerns of the member countries that these tariffs should be looked in a bigger context rather than very micro, let's say, trade perspective alone. So I agree with your term, unified, in the sense that we must be collective in that sense. But as far as the tariffs per se, that has to be dealt with bilaterally, individually, but collectively having the big message across.
Thank you so much. And given the strategic importance of both Malaysia and Singapore in ASEAN, how can the two nations collaborate more effectively in shaping regional responses to global challenges like climate change or technological disruption?
Well, Malaysia and Singapore have led the way in many areas as two countries which have been actually at the forefront in terms of coming up with solutions. Now that you have just heard about, this new thing that we are looking at, the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. Sorry, I'm touching on a little bit on the economic side, but the point I want to emphasize is that these two countries have been sort of forerunners in showing that countries can take an integrated approach. Now, you brought specific examples of climate change and technological disruptions. These are very big issues. Actually, climate change is a huge problem. It does not only involve Malaysia and Singapore, but we can collectively pass the message that all of ASEAN, plus our neighbors around ASEAN, have to play a role in terms of what we call environment. But technological disruption, I think Malaysia and Singapore, are among the two countries which have very high levels of technology adoption. I'm not sure exactly because I'm not a technologist myself per se, right? But I think we can show the way that two countries can look and work together and come up with creative ideas to address a problem. Like the ambassador mentioned just now, creative solutions is what we are all known for, and I think that's where our strength lies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irlango. That's all we have for today. I'm Lauren Tan, and back to you at the studios.
In the debut episode of Wu Says, Melissa Idris sat down with Professor Emeritus Dr. Wu Wing Tai to unpack the economic shockwaves following the dramatic slashing of tariffs between US and China. During the session, Dr. Wu offered his candid take on what this move signals for global trade. Here is a snippet of the conversation.
Well, I knew that the very high tariffs that they had imposed on each other basically decouple the two economies. It would, if continue, it would completely eliminate trade between the two countries. And given how closely intermeshed they are in production networks, I cannot see how a sudden rupture like this would not cause extreme pain on both sides. And the question is, number one, why are they doing this to themselves? Or rather, why is Donald Trump doing this? Number one. And number two, does he think he could get away with it? And what we see now is a very embarrassing picture for Americans to see Donald Trump make another unconvincing announcement of victory, that the Chinese have come to the table and we have got them to lower their tariff from 125 to 10. Whereas the Americans, of course, also lowered their tariffs from 145 to 30.
Wait. Well, I have to ask you, why would you say that it's unconvincing? Unconvincing to whom? I mean, both sides are claiming victory, for sure. But why is the US unconvincing? Why is the US's claim to victory not convincing?
Because, well, it is not convincing, largely because it got no concessions out from the Chinese, other than, okay, you lower your gun, I lower my gun. But that is not a victory. A victory is when the other guy put down his gun and while you still have yours pointed at him. What it really shows is that China has gotten too big to be bullied.
Catch the full conversation on all Awani International social media accounts at Power Affairs.
That wraps up Awani International. Stay tuned for reports on the rivalry, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astrawani.com for more and be sure to follow our social media accounts, Power Affairs. That is all for now. I'm Panashe. Thank you and good night.